In this video, we're going to learn about primitive data types in Java. Especially, I'm going to focus on integer and floating point primitive data types in Java. So let's get it started. So first, I'm going to look at integer data types. So integer data types. To that, we have byte, we have short, int, and long. Those are the four integer data types. So size of byte is 8 bits. This is 16 bits. Int is 32 bits. And long is 64 bits. Now, if we look at the byte, its size is 8 bits. That doesn't mean we can store highest number as that. It's not going to work because internally computers, they use different mechanism to store data. So you might hear terms like sign magnitude. You may hear like ones complement and third one is like twos complement. So the storage on today's computers is uses a technique called twos complement to store signed numbers. So all these data types are signed. So that means we have to divide this total range into two parts, negative and positive numbers. So if I want to store a byte as a signed data, then what I have to do is its range, instead of going up to 256, I have to divide this into 2. So we're going to say something like minus 128 through plus 127. So the highest positive number you can store is 127 in a byte. The highest negative number you can store is minus 128. Another way to think about is because there are 8 bits in a byte, so to find out the range, you can do something like 2 to the 7. So this is 8 minus 1, that is 7, because we are dividing in the half. So that's the negative range, and your positive range is 2 to the 7 minus 1. Applying the same logic, if I have to do for, let's say, short, so size of the short is 16 bits, right? So we're going to divide into a range, negative and positive range. So we're going to say 2 to the 15. That's the highest negative number you can store. And on the positive side, you're going to say 2 to the 15 minus 1, whatever that number is. Same thing applies with int. So the highest negative number you can go with is 2 to the 31, and the highest positive number you can store is 2 to the 31 minus 1. And then finally for the long, the highest negative number you can have is 2 to the, so total is 64, so 63, and on the positive side you can have 2 to the 63 minus 1. So that basically gives you an idea how big number you can store in each of these data types. Another way to look at these data types is you can think of these as containers. So for example, if I want to store, let's say, um, this number, so can I store in a byte? Yes, if it is, this is a byte container, I can store it, because you know that the highest positive number you can go is up to 127, and that 50 is less than 127, so this is going to work. Uh, but if you try to, let's say, this is another byte container, if you try to store, let's say, 200, that's going to do the overflow, because this is a container which at the max can go is 127, and we are trying to store 200, so this is not going to work. Okay, now let's quickly focus on floating point data, primitive data in Java. So for floating point, we have two data types in Java. These are float and double. So size of float is 32 bits and size of double is 64 bits. So just like integer data has a special representation in the hardware, floating data is also represented uh, with the IEEE standards, especially 754 standard. So for example, if I want to express a number like 2.32, we're going to be using floating point data. So anytime you have a decimal representation, then you can use these floating point data types in Java to store that value. Now let's look at some examples how to use these data types in Java programs. Before we do that, let me say one more thing. For integer data types, that means byte, short, int, and long, the default used by Java is int. So that is the default for integer data types. For floating point data, the default is double. That means if you don't specify, let's say if I have a number 22, if I don't specify is it a byte or int, short or long, Java gonna assume that it's of type int. So that's what it means, the default. And for the floating point numbers, if you don't specify if it is a float or double, Java gonna assume that it's a double. So let's go to NetBeans and see some examples of declaring these data types and using in a program. So I have a simple program here. So let's try to declare, so if you want to declare a byte, so here this is the type, which is byte. This is name of the variable. So every container you create, you have to give a name. So the container is basically your variable. So here name of your variable is b, and the data it's storing is 3 inside it. You can declare a short, something like s, and value is, let's say, 4. You can store int, say x equals 5. So, and if you want to declare a long, you specify a number, and then you append that number with a lowercase l or uppercase L. Both are okay, which basically tells the Java that this specific number is of type long. So there is another way. If you want to use lowercase, that should be fine too, 7L. So you can use uppercase or lowercase to designate that this data is of type long. You don't have to do for any of the remaining ones. And make sure that you keep in mind that if you don't specify, then Java assumes that data type is integer. So that's how you can declare integer data types. Now let's look at some examples of floating point data types. So if you want to declare a, let's say, a double, then you can say 2.5, that's a double. Oh, we need to give a name to the variable, so let's say d. So this is again same process we are following: type of the variable, variable name, and value, current value. So here this is the data type, which is double in this case, name of the variable, and what value it currently has, which is 2.5. If I want to declare a float, then we're gonna say, let's say this is f, and you can say 5.67, and then you have to, either you can use uppercase F to specify that this number is a float, or you can also use lowercase. So f2 8 point, let's say 2 lowercase f. So except for long and float, everything else looks pretty straightforward. Anytime, just remember, anytime you want to do a long, just append a lowercase l or uppercase L. If you're anytime you want to do a float, append lowercase f or uppercase F for a float. Thank you for watching the video.